I'm here to argue, to do a rebuttal against the argument that during a breakup, the woman experiences more harmful consequences compared to their male counterparts. I will argue against their secondary claims that women suffer greater loss of time invested in a relationship than men, that women are prone to ask questions about the relationship and face with the issue head on, and that they are more cautious to move on and let go of a relationship. I'm going to argue that the lack of sufficient evidence and faulty reasoning does not support the claim that specifically during a breakup, women experience more harmful consequences. The first claim that women suffer greater loss of time is inherently a hasty generalization, as it does not consider all of the factors involved in the time and effort that each gender puts into a relationship as individuals. One person might spend more time or effort thinking and working on the relationship, while the other isn't as actively involved. But in our modern time, one sex does not statistically put in more time or effort than the other. The grounds for the subclaim are also faulty. What would structurally act as a warrant for the statement that women date to find a life partner, it doesn't sufficiently support why women suffer greater loss of time. So instead, Ashley puts a listing of examples of what comprises a life partner. Elizabeth's second point, that women spend more time on appearances for the sake of men, would be a better explanation for this line of reasoning. Women do tend to invest more because of an evolutionary predisposition for preparing to be the bearer and primary caretaker of potential offspring, which would have been better evidence or support or backing. Furthermore, little backing or additional evidence is provided. Statistics on the reasons why women date or global percentages on the external societal forces upon women's dependency on men would be more sufficient. It cannot be denied that mass media and gender stereotypes portrays women's psyches, and the gender stereotypes or portrays of women's psyches are pressuring women to invest time and energy in being appealing to the opposite sex. However, providing the extent of Hollywood's portrayal of women doesn't illustrate the actual statistical amount of time women will spend on being attractive. Business statistics and gross product income of companies that cater to female appearance, or the tragic percentage of low self-esteem worldwide would be a better form of evidence. I will move on to her secondary claim that women are prone to ask more questions about the relationship and face the issue head on. The warrants that follow this subclaim don't necessarily support the claim that women, just give me a moment. It does not support the claim that women suffer more. Having a deeper understanding of the relationship and the willingness to put time and effort into figuring out what's wrong with it has the chance of making the relationship better, or understanding why it would be better for somebody for a breakup to occur. This claim also suggests that women tend more than men to face the issue head on, and it is hard to bring up the honest, painful truth for both sexes. Most studies analyze differences in communications, but not that one communicates more than the other. Furthermore, the tertiary statement that men go out and drink and move on to the next one makes a couple of faulty assertions. First, that men hide their feelings implies a warrant that drinking leads to forgetting one's lover. First off, the consumption of liquor does not get rid of memories. And secondly, this connection also supports that only men engage in such behavior, which is also a hasty generalization and a stereotype inaccurately portrayed in the media, for which there is no evidence provided. In fact, studies have shown that men suffer more long-term after a breakup, which brings me to my second refutation. Against the second supporting point that women look for friends to lean on, which actually undermines her major claim. Women are known to be evolutionarily conditioned to be more in tune with their emotions. It is precisely their willingness to discuss their emotions with friends that make it easier for a woman to eventually and truly move on. My final rebuttal against her third subclaim, that women suffer more, that women are more cautious to let go of a relationship. There is no sourcing provided, nor do the tertiary points necessarily lead to that conclusion. Studies have shown that even though women may suffer more emotionally, it is because of this tendency to discuss their emotional state. Finally, that the idea that breakup sex is important to avoid is more advice than supporting grounds. It also suggests that women experience oxytocin and men don't, which is false. Oxytocin occurs in both males and females, although there is a higher amount that occurs in women. And that is my
Okay, the structural material is laid out pretty clearly at the beginning of the speech. I think right away you begin to try and analyze the reasoning by using some of the concepts that we talked about. You mentioned a hasty generalization, and I can appreciate that because there's a lack of information that's being offered to support that particular point. But you ought to point out what the kind of information that they had. What information did they cite to do this? Did they cite an expert? No. Did they cite any examples? No. Did they cite any any statistical information? No. They took it as a premise, which is an unproved premise, that this is in fact the case. That is problematic. And then you kind of suggest, here's a way that they could have proved it, and I don't think that's the right strategy that you want at all. It would be like, I said this last night to somebody else, the defense attorney holding up and said, you should have shown my client's fingerprints on the gun like I have right here. That doesn't really do you much good in doing that kind of thing. I know you think, well, I'm criticizing the other person's argument, and it's more an evaluation of the argument than it is a refutation of the argument. So I don't think that does you much good. And you did that again on the second point also. You had the same kind of argument there. I thought it was a little awkward that you frequently criticized the advocate for failing to cite any sources, and I didn't hear any source citation in your argument whatsoever. So you've got to be a little bit more consistent on that. You mentioned studies, for instance, that studies say, or you made a kind of a vague reference to, I thought this was a good one, that men suffer more long-term, and I go, oh, that's a good piece of information. Wait, it's not a piece of information, it's just an assertion as far as I can tell. So I'm sure there's some information there.
This was a rough draft.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was doing a second phase.
Oh, well, sometimes that happens. So, like I said, I think you had the arguments out there. You followed the structure. You're doing that okay. But like I said, I think there are bits and pieces of information missing here. And sometimes you're trying to rely on some analysis that's not always clear. When we talked about the fallacies, for instance, you have to explain the mistake that's being made, and you have to explain it in a fairly clear way. Sometimes I just get the feeling that you are kind of defining what's going on without describing what it is that they did. And that, I think, is not going to go as far at convincing people that you're correct on that particular point. All right, thank you.